Hello everyone, today is 17th of December. Now it's 9:30 in the morning Moscow time. I'm Levan Gudadze and this is my first update for the day in which I'll share all the main news that are making headlines in Russian media outlets and Russian language pages on different internet platforms. Later on today, I will publish second news update on my Patreon and Boosty pages with additional main news that Russian media will report during their day. And if you are looking for more news from Russia, more commentary, and if you like my work and want to support, you're more than welcome to join our communities on Patreon and Boosty. Links are on this video description box and in the pinned comment. That's being said, let's go through some news. And first of all, breaking news for this morning, which is that as a result of explosion, high-ranking Russian military official was killed in Moscow. Let's translate this report from RIA Novosti for a little more details. So, the head of the radiation, chemical and biological protection troops of the Russian armed forces, Igor Kirillov, was killed in an explosion in the southeast of Moscow. The investigative committee stated in a Telegram channel. On Ryazansky Prospect in Moscow, an explosive device was set off, placed in a scooter standing next to an entrance of the residential building. As a result of the incident, man was killed, Kirillov and his assistant. The investigative committee said. So this is a big deal, obviously. This is a big deal. General Kirillov is a person who was actively highlighting criminal activity of not just Kiev regime when it comes to chemical, biological weapons, radioactive materials, but also criminal activity in very same field of US militaries. He was actively highlighting actions of activities of biolabs of US militaries, including in Ukraine. General Kirillov also on several occasions at least highlighted risks that Kiev regime with assistance of US backers are working potentially on developing dirty bombs. And as I said many times before in my updates, I'm quite sure that the next phase, Western ruling class plans for next phase of escalation with Russia to transform Kiev regime into a nuclear-armed regime. And General Kirillov was definitely highlighting these risks also. And just recently, he was personally sanctioned by US. So he was target for US secret services. He was target for so-called secret services of the Kiev regime. And unfortunately, they managed to conduct this terrorist attack and neutralize him and also another military person that was with Kirillov. This morning, according to reports that I see on Russia segment of internet, this second person, military person, was his driver or security guard. Both died as a result of explosion. So this is definitely a big deal. It's not just a direct attack on these persons, but also, I guess, as a secondary target is to jeopardize unity in Russia and also trust that Russian people have into government. I guess this was also in mind of organizers of this terrorist attack. And one may ask now question how Moscow will respond. And well, I don't know, dear friends. Maybe I don't know. I just don't know. Whatever I might say, it's just it's going to be pure speculation. So I don't think it is reasonable to go into speculations. I guess Moscow will react one way or another. We might hear some statements, some warnings, some actions even. We may see some actions. I don't know. Maybe Russian leadership will finally authorize strikes on terrorist regime in Kiev and the leadership of that terrorist regime. Maybe, although I have some doubts about it. So therefore, I just don't know what will be the Russia's reaction, but this is definitely big deal as a big news because well, if high-ranking officials of defense ministry are not protected in Moscow, then who is? You know, so so this is breaking news for now. Of course, in our next updates, I will share additional news as it becomes available. But unfortunately, Western ruling class and their assets continue, their proxies continue this terrorist assault on Russia, and you know, they are conducting terrorist attacks even in Moscow. So this is breaking news. Now let's go through some other topics. TASS news agency is reporting that the Russian Defense Ministry confirmed their information that Elizavetovka settlement in a DPR is liberated. Also, we have this reporter from TASS news agency that yesterday Defense Minister of Russian Federation, Andrei Belosov, during their meeting of Russian military leadership with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, Belosov stated that since the beginning of special military operation, Kiev regime lost about a million military personnel killed and wounded. I think this number is quite conservative, and in reality, real losses of the Kiev regime is significantly higher, maybe even double of this number. But the defense ministry is sharing this information that about 1 million casualties. After all, even Western military experts are saying that Kiev regime most likely already lost from 500 to 700 military personnel killed in action. And if that is the case, then usually military statistics go as for everyone killed, KIA is like at least 3 to 5 wounded, and simple math is telling us that if Kiev regime lost 500 to 700,000 military personnel as a KIA, then overall casualty number should be around at least 2 million, right? Meanwhile, RT is reporting that Russian president during that meeting yesterday with the leadership of Russian Defense Ministry stated that West is pushing Russia beyond the red lines, which is definitely true. And for example, today's morning's terrorist attack that killed a high-ranking Russian military official, general, one more confirmation that Western ruling class definitely pushing Russia beyond red lines. A question is, how will Moscow respond on that, right? Because statements, warnings clearly are not enough to deter Western ruling class, right? Hardly anyone can doubt that. Anyway, let's go through this news. The West's support for Ukraine is pushing Russia to their point where it cannot help but retaliate, President Vladimir Putin has said while warning the US against deploying medium-range missiles. Speaking at the meeting of a top Russian Defense Ministry officials on Monday, Putin accused the US of seeking to weaken our country and inflict a strategic defeat on Moscow by counting to pump de facto illegitimate ruling regime in Kiev with weapons and money, sending mercenaries and military advisors, thereby encouraging further escalation of the conflict. Washington is instilling fear in Americans by resorting to simple tactics, Putin stated. They push us to the red line. We began to respond, and then they frightened their population, he added, suggesting that the US used the same approach during its rivalry with the Soviet Union. Russian president also slammed the West for what he described as an attempt to impose its own rules on the rest of the world, while waging hybrid wars against anyone who resists, including Russia. In this way, NATO is boosting its defense spendings and forming strike groups near Russia's borders. He added, the number of American service members in Europe has already exceeded 100,000 troops. He noted NATO is ramping up its presence not only in Europe but also in regions that have never seen this type of military footprint, particularly the Asia-Pacific, Putin said, voicing particular concerns over US plans to deploy missile systems with range up to 5,500 kilometers. Putin was referring to a type of weapon previously banned by their Cold War era Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. The US unilaterally pulled out of their treaty in 2018, citing Russian non-compliance and allegation Moscow has denied. The Russian president stressed that despite Washington's withdrawal from their INF treaty, Moscow made a unilateral and voluntary commitment not to deploy medium and short-range missiles unless the US deploys such weapons anywhere in the world. However, if the United States begins to deploy such systems, then all our voluntary restrictions will be lifted, Putin warned. So that's a short highlight of his statements from that meeting yesterday that he had with the high-ranking officials of Russian Defense Ministry. I guess this General Kirillov that was assassinated by Kiev regime, I'm quite sure, Kiev regime and CIA with involvement. I'm 100% convinced, by the way, this terrorist attack was organized by Kiev regime with the active assistance of the CIA and potentially MI6, and I guess investigation will prove that. And I guess this General Kirillov also was presented yesterday on that meeting that Putin was giving this speech. Let's continue with some more news. TASS news agency is reporting that a permanent representative of the Russian Federation in UN, Vasily Nebezhny, once again highlighted Russia's position when it comes to Ukrainian crisis. He says that freezing of the conflict is unacceptable for Russian Federation, as it is unacceptable presence of NATO troops in this former Soviet republic. Let's go through this news also for a little more details. So Russia categorically rejects any proposals to freeze the conflict in Ukraine, as well as their participation of the NATO in the settlement of the crisis. Russian permanent representative into UN, Vasily Nebezhny, said he stated this at the meeting of the UN Security Council devoted to our situation in Ukraine. And then, quote, we would like to remind you once again that no schemes to freeze the conflict have satisfied Russia. We are fully convinced by the example of their Minsk agreements that neither the West nor the Kiev junta can be trusted, and we are well aware that the purpose of this exercise is to give the Kiev regime a much needed respite on their battlefield to lick its wounds, the diplomat said. He also stressed that Russia will not allow any role of NATO in resolving the Ukrainian crisis, calling the alliance a part of the problem. There can be no question of any role of NATO in the settlement of the Ukrainian crisis. From the very beginning, their alliance and the prospects for Ukraine's membership were part of the problem, not part of their solution, Nebezhny said. So there we have once again official position of the Russian Federation when it comes to all these speculations that we see recently in the West about freezing this conflict and deployment of European troops, which is NATO troops, on the line of contact to observe ceasefire stuff. Moscow is not interested in these sick ideas of Western ruling class and their puppets in the governments of collective West countries, number of collective West countries. RIA Novosti, meanwhile, is reporting that President-elect of US, Donald Trump, once again shared his opinion while talking to journalists about long-range strikes deep into Russian territory with their Western weapon systems, including US missiles, and he said that he's against it. Let's translate this news also. Let's translate this news also for a little more details. US President-elect Donald Trump on Monday said that Ukraine should not have been allowed to launch long-range missile strikes deep into Russian territory, adding that this was a bad decision that could be reconsidered. First of all, I will repeat myself that this decision to authorize long-range strikes deep into Russian territory was not about authorizing Kiev regime, because Kiev regime is unable to conduct such strikes. This authorization was for US military personnel to conduct such strikes deep into Russian territory, because those ATACMS missiles, for example, US-made ATACMS missiles, are launched by US militaries. It's a US militaries that are directly attacking Russia and killing and wounding Russian civilians and their militaries, right? This should be clear for everybody. And same goes for British Storm Shadow missiles or French Scalp EG missiles. Whenever those missiles are deployed, of course, it's a British and French military personnel that is directly involved in these strikes. This is just too obvious for everybody who is more or less informed about current developments, right? I don't think, and then quote by the way here, I don't think they should have allowed strikes 200 miles deep into Russia, he told reporters, referring to the US issued authorization for the Ukrainian military to strike deep into Russia with long-range Western missiles. Trump added that it was a bad decision and also noted that he might reconsider it after outgoing US President Joe Biden previously allowed the armed forces of Ukraine to use Western missiles for long-range strikes on Russia. Well, I don't know, by the way. Once Trump in office, maybe he will reconsider this decision and ban US militaries to participate in these long-range strikes. Maybe he would not. Maybe the statements that Trump is making right now is a part of a deception operation that is focused on misleading Russian leadership to basically gain time and to gain time and to create this false narrative that once Trump is in office, then the escalation might happen, so that Moscow should not retaliate harshly on these long-range strikes. Maybe that's what is happening really. I don't know, because I find it difficult to believe that Biden's administration or Pentagon made such a decision without consulting with the president-elect and his team, right? They're not gonna say it openly if there was talk between the sides and if Trump was informed about it. They're not gonna say it openly, right? Ever. But I would not be surprised at all if these statements of Trump and his team, members of his team, that once they are in office, they may reconsider this and they may de-escalate that. Maybe all that talk is just BS and part of media operation on or part of informational war that Western ruling class is waging against Russia. Maybe. We will find out, by the way, we will find out. Me personally, I don't believe that once Trump will be in office, he will de-escalate anything, really. I don't believe in that. Right? His speaks clearly demonstrates that he is not about de-escalation. And after all, we all know perfectly well that it's not the presidents of US that make decisions, major decisions. It's some shadow forces that are pulling the strings and making and influencing policies of the Washington. And if anybody had any doubts about it, then past 4 years of Biden's administration was, I guess, clear enough demonstration that I am correct with this assumption, right? Biden was not making no decisions about anything, really. He barely can recognize himself while looking at the mirror, what kind of decision he would make. But someone was making decisions, right? Someone did authorize US military personnel to conduct these long-range strikes deep into Russian territory. Someone that is not elected by US citizens. Anyways, let's continue. RIA Novosti is reporting that on very same meeting with the journalists, Trump was asked about Zelensky, if he was invited on his inauguration, and he said no, he didn't invite him. Although I watched a short video, by the way, I even shared that video on my Telegram channel and on my Twitter X also, if I remember correctly. And he also said that even though he didn't invite Zelensky, he would like to see him, or he would not be against to see him on that gathering. That was his response. Okay, I mean, who cares if Zelensky is invited or not, but he was asked about it and he gave his response. And when it comes to Trump's statements, well, this is the news about inauguration, and he also stated, Trump also stated that he is planning to have negotiations with Zelensky and Putin in foreseeable future. Okay. We will see, but at least for now, there is no indicators that anybody in Russia should expect adequate policy change from Western ruling class. I don't see any reason to believe that once Trump is in office, we will really see the escalation. I just don't see single reason to believe in that. Statements are not mean anything at this point, right? Many statements was made by Western officials many times before. Those statements never meant anything, right? So therefore, just the statements are not enough. It's already 17th of December, isn't it? About 1 month, and Trump is going to be in office, and we will find out. But I think we will see further escalation, not the de-escalation, but we will see further escalation to the point when world will end up under the risk of full-scale nuclear exchange. I'm afraid that's what is going to happen. And then, and only then, we might start seeing some signs of de-escalation, because at that point, Western ruling class probably will recognize that they are on a line of fire themselves. And only then, they will authorize their puppets in the governments of collective West countries to start de-escalating. That's how it's going to be, by the way, mark my word. Vzglyad newspaper, meanwhile, is reporting that new head of EU's diplomacy, and this sounds strange, by the way, new head of EU diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, probably most uneducated person among EU bureaucracy, is the head of EU's diplomacy now. But anyways, this extreme Russophobe, Nazi and racist individual is in charge of EU's foreign policies, at least formally, and she's saying that EU is not yet in the talks to deploy peacekeepers into Ukraine. And a few days earlier, it was exactly her, Kaja Kallas, that was saying that EU might deploy peacekeepers if ceasefire is achieved. So I mean, these people, as I told you just a minute ago, by the way, statements right now from politicians, they mean nothing in majority of cases. Today they might say one thing, tomorrow another, day after something else, and meanwhile they might act even differently, right? So therefore we cannot take seriously no statements from majority of the politicians at least. And when it comes to this particular topic, by the way, EU has no troops. EU cannot deploy peacekeepers anywhere. EU has no army officially. EU member states do have armies, but not the EU itself, right? EU is still, at least formally, economical union, right? As organization. And organizations don't have armies, right? But EU member states are also NATO member states, and the Russian leadership was very clear that Moscow will never agree on presence of NATO troops in this former Soviet Republic. At least outside of the Western, in my understanding, Russia will never agree on presence of NATO troops, at least outside of the Western Ukraine. Western Ukraine, that's a whole different story. I shared my take on that. But rest of the Ukraine is a historical Russia, by the way. If anybody still don't know, I will say that Ukraine was created by Bolsheviks on Russian territory, on territory of the Russia. There was no Ukraine previously in history, right? Never. There was no such a kingdom, no such a state, republic, nothing. There was only part of the land that Poles start calling Ukraina at some point, some 200 years ago or 300 years ago. And Ukraina in Polish language means outskirt. And from Poles, this meaning came to Russian language, and Russians start calling that territory that was a part of Russia Ukraina, outskirts, and Bolsheviks then transferred that into Republic Ukraine. And Ukraine was created on Russian territory, right? Initially. Although then when Stalin came to power, he took some land from Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Romania, and give that land to Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. So therefore, now one may argue that Ukraine was created on the land of Russia, Poland, Romania, and formerly Czechoslovakia, although in reality, that territory, Transcarpathia, a region of the Western Ukraine, before First World War used to be part of Hungary and was given to Czechoslovakia after First World War. So historically speaking, that territory belongs to Hungary, right? Anyways, let's go through some other news. So that's why I'm saying Western Ukraine is a bit complicated stuff. I don't think Russia will be extremely disappointed if after this conflict will end, Western Ukraine will end up under control of NATO and eventually will be reclaimed by Poland, Hungary, and Romania. But when it comes to the rest of the territory, there will be no NATO troops there, because it's a Russian land, historical Russian land, and should be in Russia, should be part of Russia. That's how it is. At least from Kharkov to Odessa and rest, if rest will maintain statehood on the political map, definitely should be free of Western influence, let's say this way. Anyways, let's continue. Vzglyad newspaper is reporting that Hungary and I believe Slovakia also blocked yet another aid package, financial aid package for Kiev regime, financial military aid package for Kiev regime, this time for 6.5 billion euros. Okay. For how long? That's the question I have right now. For how long Hungary and Slovakia, leadership of these countries, will be able to veto decision-making process of their Brussels bureaucrats to allocate another billions and billions, additional billions for a formerly Kiev regime. But at least for now, Kiev regime should not expect this 6.5 billion. Although they are receiving plenty of money anyways, right? To enrich themselves. That's quite enough. The US is allocating every other week at least several hundred millions or even billions, and many other NATO member states doing their same. So plenty of money is flowing formally towards Kiev regime, and in reality towards the pockets of the corrupt officials of the West and military industrial complex of the West, right? RT is also reporting that Kiev names a street after Holocaust perpetrator. No surprises there, by the way. A street in Kiev has been renamed in honor of World War II Ukrainian militant Taras Borovets as a part of nationalist push to glorify outstanding figures of Ukraine and erase Russian and Soviet history. Ukrainian government went on a derussification spree in 2015 following the US-backed coup d'etat in Kiev the year prior, and redoubled its efforts following the escalation of the conflict with Moscow in 2022. Holocaust scholar Marta Gavrishko noted the name change on Monday morning, calling it a symptom of the troubling phenomenon of Vladimir Zelensky's Ukraine, making the regional cult of nationalistic heroes who collaborated with Nazis in the Holocaust national policy. And when this person, Marta Gavrishko, is saying that Zelensky's regime is implementing on entire Kiev-controlled territory this regional cult of extreme Nazism and the fascism, of course, she's referring to Western Ukraine because that's their birthplace, basically, and their main ideological stronghold of political Ukrainism, right? This neo-Nazi fascist ideology. I remind you, dear friends, that ethnic group, there is no such ethnic group as a Ukrainian. It's just non-existent, never existed, and will never exist, scientifically speaking, right? This is a purely political phenomenon that was basically promoted big time by British and the German secret services. And they started working on this political Ukrainianism idea some 200 years ago, if not longer. Even Bismarck, by the way, was talking about it, German chancellor, right? That if they want to weaken Russia, they have to, further support this political Ukrainianism, this idea that there are some Ukrainians that are not Russians. And unfortunately, they, after decades and decades and decades of pouring fuel into this nonsensical, crazy idea, they managed to influence, brainwash, basically, quite a number of people, especially in Western Ukraine, and those idiots really are believing now in some fantasies that they have in their sick imagination, right? And they are glorifying Nazis, by the way. They are glorifying Nazis, mass murderers that were collaborating with Nazi Germany, right? Even SS, by the way. During the Second World War, as you know, SS formations of the Nazi Germany was most brutal formations, right? Most brutal, inhuman formations. And even SS members were horrified by actions that these Ukrainian Nazis were committing during the Second World War. And those individuals being glorified now by Kiev regime. And Western governments, by the way, and majority of the Western public, as far as I understand, they are supporting this. That's who they are supporting, by the way. That's who they are supporting in reality. One may argue that majority of the Western public have no idea about this stuff, but they should know better. They should learn better. There is alternative media in the internet that provides additional information, right? So if they wanted to, they would have better knowledge about the situation, but anyways, let's continue. And before I go through some more news, let me notice, dear friends, that this small media project is completely subscriber funded, completely depends on you, on community. And if you like my work, if you think I deserve to be in this field of news and political commentary, please consider to support her with small donations through PayPal or Boosty, or by subscribing to my Patreon page. All the links to my PayPal, Boosty, Patreon, crypto wallet is under this video in the description box and in the pinned comment. And right now you are seeing on your screen my Twitter X page. And if you are on Twitter, I mean, it's free subscription, isn't it? And if you are on Twitter, please consider to subscribe. One day, maybe this page will become one of the main sources of communication. If, for example, YouTube blocks my channel, which might happen any day, really. As I said, all the links under this video in the description box and in the pinned comment. Let's go through some more news now. And first, I want to check length of this video. It's quite long. I'll give you at least a short summary of there several more news. TASS news agency is reporting that Israel conducted yet another large-scale strikes on whatever is remaining from Syria's air defense systems, this time in Tartus direction. And there was huge explosions, by the way. You can see right now on your screen one of the episodes of this strike. I mean, I guess some munition, some depot was destroyed where air defense missiles were located, because the explosion is really huge, for sure. And basically, Israel already conducted hundreds and hundreds of sorties to destroy basically as much weapons, especially long-range weapons, as possible that Syrian Arab army had at one point. And US is actively supporting, by the way, Israeli actions. US Air Force is also conducting sorties, dozens of sorties to destroy these long-range weapons that are left in Syria. TASS news agency, meanwhile, is reporting that Yemeni Houthi rebels or Ansar Allah movement stated that they launched a hypersonic missile towards a target in Tel Aviv area in Israel. And dear friends, on one of the channels, I noticed this morning news that Israeli air defense systems intercepted missile over their Tel Aviv. Possibly that missile was exactly the one that Houthi rebels said that they launch. Also, we have this report that possibly as a retaliation for this launch towards Tel Aviv, US conducted precision airstrike on Yemeni capital. So US forces have launched a precision airstrike against a key command and control facility reportedly operating by Iran-backed rebels within a Houthi-controlled territory in Sana'a, Yemen. So Middle East is on fire, and unfortunately there is no signs of the escalation, at least for now, really. TASS news agency is also reporting that Syria is calling BRICS to help in rebuilding of Syria. I guess this call is coming from these terrorists, by the way, that just overrun Syria, and I find it difficult to believe that BRICS member states will even bother to pay any attention to any calls from current regime in Syria, terrorist regime in Syria, right? especially China, would not pay attention to it for sure, and I'll tell you why. Syria calls on BRICS countries to help it rebuild. This was stated by the Syrian politician, former head of opposition delegation at their talks on Syria in Geneva and Astana, Mohammed Al-Lusher, who is now working closely with I guess, with these terrorists that overrun Syria, Turkish, Israeli, US, UK, Turkish-backed, financed and controlled terrorists. So yes, no way BRICS will pay much attention to anything that comes out from this terrorist regime there, and they should never pay any attention. Let Israel, Turkey, US, UK rebuild Syria. Let them do this. They supported these terrorists, isn't it, and their actions. So let them deal with that situation now. Meanwhile, by the way, I want to pay your attention to this video that the Telegraph, British propaganda outlet, published, and I'm not going to run this video now. It's like 4 minutes, but still, what I want to highlight is that British and Western propaganda outlets, Western MSM, is now actively pushing new narrative, and I'm highlighting beginning of this new narrative, that there are some Uyghur freedom fighters, by the way, that participate in this terrorist onslaught in Syria, and now they are promising to go back to China. So look at the headline of this video: Uyghur fighters in Syria vow to come for China next. You know, I said many times before in my updates that in Idlib province, thousands and thousands of citizens of China, predominantly from Muslim Uyghur minority, were undergoing training in terrorist camps and under strict control, of course, of Western secret services and the Turkish secret services, together with these Uyghur terrorists, thousands and thousands of citizens of Central Asian republics of former Soviet Union, Uzbekistan, for example, were also undergoing training in the terrorist camps. You might find there terrorists from Uzbekistan or from Kyrgyzstan, from Kazakhstan. These republics are from Tajikistan also. And with the exception of Tajikistan, this rest of the republics in Central Asia are Turkic-speaking republics, right? And Uyghurs, by the way, ethnic minorities in the northern western part of China, are also Turkic-speaking, right? And I said quite a number of times before that one of the main goals of the Western ruling class when it comes to confrontation with China is one of the directions is to destabilize Central Asian republics, especially ones that are bordering China, Chinese northern western regions, and that will be Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, right? To destabilize these republics and Tajikistan, for example, although Tajikistan is not Turkic speaking, Tajiks are speaking Tajik language is a part of Iranian language family, right? But anyways, to go back to our main point, I was saying that Western ruling classes plans to destabilize Central Asian republics, especially ones that are bordering China, and then Western ruling classes plans to transfer all these thousands and thousands of terrorists from Chinese Uyghur province, Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Territory, also Turkic-speaking terrorists from these Central Asian republics into these destabilized areas of Central Asia. And then Western ruling class wants to use Central Asia as a sort of stronghold or trampoline to basically infiltrate China, right? Chinese northern western provinces, to destabilize these regions and to create additional turmoil in China, additional issues, right? security issues or problems, and to create additional problems. Basically, that's the plan that Western ruling class has. And right now, by the way, we are observing media part of this operation, right? When they will try to whitewash all these terrorists, they will call them freedom fighters, inclusive, that are all for inclusivity and all for, they are woke terrorists now, right? That kind of stuff. I mean, unbelievable, man. So anyways, that's what is going on, by the way. Western ruling class is whitewashing now. Western propaganda is whitewashing these terrorists. And once, and mark my word, dear friends, it's only a matter of time, and we will see attempts to destabilize Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, potentially Tajikistan, and Central Asia, as I said, will be eventually used if West will manage successfully to destabilize these areas. Then it will be used as a trampoline to infiltrate China and to send these thousands of terrorists, or Uyghur terrorists, Uzbek terrorists, Kyrgyz terrorists, or Kazakh terrorists, and there are more others, by the way, more others, into China to destabilize China. That is what is going on. And this video, when I saw this video, by the way, I wanted to share it with you to highlight that I definitely have a point. I definitely have a point. I think my reading of the big picture is correct. And look at the headline of this video, by the way. Uyghur fighters in Syria vow to come for China next. Is this not at least indirect confirmation that Western ruling class definitely plans to conduct, to operate in a way that I just described? That's what is going on, and that's why, by the way, in no circumstances, I think China will even consider to get involved in supporting these terrorists in Syria. And I think it is time for China to recognize that Turkey is not the country that they can rely on. And China has big plans, by the way, had at least previously big plans when it comes to Turkey. Big investments were going into certain projects. And I guess Beijing has good enough reasons now to think about its own security and think about risks that China will face already in 2025, by the way, because I think we will see first steps of the Western ruling class in direction of destabilizing Central Asia and then using those territories to infiltrate China. We will see those first steps in 2025 already. Mark my word. RT is reporting, meanwhile, that Germany's Scholz loses confidence vote. Many of you probably already are informed about it. So German Chancellor Olaf Scholz lost the confidence vote in the parliament on Monday, paving the way for a snap election early next year. And, well, new elections might take place in February 23rd, and Scholz most likely will lose. He is no way going to become a chancellor again, I guess. Next chancellor will be that Welz or Melz or something. Also extreme Russophobe, one that was saying that he gonna talk with Moscow with the language of ultimatums, that if Moscow will not obey orders, then he will transfer Taurus missiles into control territory and that kind of stuff. Okay, we will find out. But Germany is in deep trouble, by the way, that's for sure. Due to these crazies in political elites, Germany is in deep trouble, and hardly anybody will argue with that. Meanwhile, US is promising more sanctions on Georgia because Washington is not happy that they're controlled by their so-called opposition in Georgia. Also, non-governmental organizations are unable to conduct successfully, regime change. They are struggling. They are trying to destabilize country literally every day, by the way. But until now, they were unable to successfully remove current government from power. So Washington is not happy about it, and they are threatening Georgia with more sanctions. Not surprisingly, also RT is reporting that Algeria accuses France of destabilization attempts. So Algeria's government has summoned the French ambassador to Algiers, Stéphane Romateter, over alleged efforts by France's spy agency to destabilize the North African country, local media reported at their weekend, citing diplomatic sources. And why am I not surprised, dear friends? Algeria is, I believe, one of the main suppliers of gas to France, to Europe. Algeria is a big player when it comes to gas exports, isn't it? And of course, France would love to have a control over the Algeria, former colony, full control. And I'm not at all have any doubts that French is definitely trying to manipulate in internal affairs of the Algeria. And by the way, France is backing Morocco against Algeria, and there are some tensions between Algeria and Morocco due to some territorial issues there. TASS news agency is reporting that Council of Europe, adopted, basically agreed on 15th package of sanctions against Russia, and this 15th package mainly will be focused on Russian energy sector. Western ruling class still dreams about destroying Russian energy sector, and they are imposing more and more sanctions against Russian companies, Russian businesses, Russian vessels. Okay. I mean, we managed to deal with 20,000+ sanctions that already are imposed on Russia. So really, no one cares at all. No one cares at all about more sanctions that West may come up with. And in this 15th package, by the way, EU is sanctioning not just individuals and companies from Russia or the vessels, but also from China and North Korea. So that's how it is. And I'm gonna end this update on this news, dear friends. I will right now check for a second some main news agencies for any breaking news. I can see nothing on RIA Novosti for now. Nothing on TASS. Let's see, Interfax, for example. So no break. I guess I shared all the important news for this moment. Although, as I already said, dear friends, later on I will publish on my Patreon and Boosty page additional, second news update, basically with main news that Russian media will report during the day. This is it for now. Hopefully you will find this update informative, interesting, and useful. And if so, please click that like button and leave some commentary just about anything. This is only way we can try at least to influence extremely unfair and aggressive algorithm. I mean, likes and comments. And if you can, please share my videos or information about my channel with your friends in real life or on internet, on any of the platforms that you are actively using. And yes, finally, if you like my work, if you think I deserve to be in this field of news and political commentary, and if you want to support, you can do it. All the links are in the description box and in the pinned comment. This is it for now. Have a wonderful day and take care.